We have now arrived at what is for me the all-time low point in the Halloween franchise, and that is 2009's Halloween 2, the sequel follow-up to the remake Halloween from 2007. This movie is just everything bad and done wrong. This movie to me has very few redeeming qualities. It's just not a good movie. This movie is not one I ever enjoy watching. Up until reviewing it for this video, I had only ever watched it one time in theaters. It's bad, but let's get into it. As always, please be aware that if you haven't seen this movie, this review will be containing spoilers. And so this sequel, just like the original sequel, Halloween 2 in 1981, picks up right where the 2007 movie left off. Laurie Strode had just shot Michael Myers in the face, and she begins to wander through town blankly, blindly, carrying the gun, covered in blood, walking through the rain until Sheriff Brackett finds her and takes her to the hospital where they immediately go to work on trying to get her patched up and fixed up. And this is where we get a potential glimmer of hope for the movie. Michael is presumed dead. He's loaded into the coroner's van, and they are taking him down to the station. The sheriff says keep his body locked up. On the way, the two idiot drivers crash into a cow, killing the driver instantly. The passenger, the other officer, is still alive, and so is Michael. He breaks out of the back of the van, grabs a shard of glass, and cuts the the passenger's head off using the shard of glass. He then sees his mother standing in the road in a ghostly format. She's standing next to a white horse, similar to the one she had given him as a child, a statue of a white horse in when he was still in the sanitarium when she had come to visit him for Christmas. And Michael walks towards her and off they go. Lori wakes up in the hospital, gets out of her bed, and goes and finds Annie Brackett, who's also in the hospital, recovering. And the nurse tells her she needs to go back to her room and gets called to another section, and so she leaves her to walk on her own. She starts to get lightheaded and goes back to ask the nurse for something for her head. The nurse is bleeding, and what do you know? Michael's in the hospital. He kills the nurse by stabbing her, and this is where one of the big problems for me starts in this movie. As Michael's stabbing the nurse over and over again, he's grunting, making all kinds of noise. This is something Michael's never done in any of the movies. He doesn't make noise when he kills people, so why'd they decide to add that here? The only other times I can remember Michael making noise in any of the other movies, in Halloween 2, after being shot in both eyes by Laurie Strode, he was slashing wildly with a knife in the room with Laurie and Loomis, and he was making some like whining sounds there because he had been blinded. Next, the only other noise I remember Michael making is in Halloween Resurrection when he makes a beastly howl after getting shocked in the groin with an electric cable. So those are the only two other examples I remember of Michael making noise. But in this one, he's stabbing, grunting, it just doesn't work for me. Lori goes on the run. She finds another body in the stairwell, keeps running, heads outside, makes it to a guard shack where a guard comes and says he's going to take her back. She needs to get out of the rain. Michael's found them though, kills the guard with an axe to the back, and then slowly walks around the shack. He eventually breaks in, and it looks like he's going to get Lori, and that's where our chances for a good sequel end because Lori wakes up and it is 1 year later, and this whole hospital sequence had been a dream. So Lori is now living with the Brackett family because her parents were killed in the last movie. To start things off, she heads to see her therapist, telling the therapist how she knows that she believes Michael Myers to be dead now, but she just can't forget what happened, and that's understandable. And she also says how much she misses her parents, also very understandable. We now catch up with Loomis, who is now a prima donna celebrity wannabe. He's written another book, and he is again trying to capitalize on the Michael Myers situation that he was involved in. just trying to make some more money and get himself some personal fame. He does guarantee everybody in his audience that Michael Myers is dead. So then we see Michael Myers. The big hulking guy is walking through a field. He's got a beard. He's been just wandering, I guess, around aimlessly for a year. He goes to a shed where he sees the vision of his mother again, and we also see child Michael. And she says, "Hey, it's Halloween. You got work to do. Let's go." He heads out. We see a group of, I assume, farmers who are there. They see Michael on their land. They want him off. They attack him, beat him up a little bit, but they don't know who they're messing with. He wakes up, stands up, puts his mask on, and kills the farmer, kills his friend, and then kills the daughter. All three with by stabbing. He also had thrown one and two antlers that were on the front of the car, but he did stab all three to death. He kills their dog as well and eats it, and he seems to have some sort of connection to Lori in this scene because while she's having dinner with the Brackets, she seems to be able to taste what he's doing and goes to throw up. She then has a dream and she has a vision of Michael having some weird ceremony at a child format where we see a skeleton wearing the Michael mask. We see her laying on a table and some weird figures around the table. All very weird. She also had a dream that she killed Annie. Dr. Loomis is back in Haddonfield to try to promote his book because that's all he seems to care about at this point. Michael's made his way into Haddonfield, and his first stop is at the strip club that his mother used to work at, I guess for some revenge. He wants to shut this down. He kills the bouncer outside, comes in, kills the owner, and kills the stripper, and then turns the sign from open to close. And now it is officially Halloween Day. Now, Sheriff Brackett gets a copy of Loomis's book and is very upset when he reads and finds out that Loomis had revealed that Lori is Michael Myers' sister in this book. He tries to call Annie and asks her to locate Lori because he wants to be able to tell her first. She happens to be walking by a bookstore and buys a copy of the book and finds out for herself, only to become very upset. Dr. Loomis was having a signing in town. Some people were happy to see him, but he also got confronted by Linda, who died in the first movie's father, and blames Loomis for the fact that this happened. Loomis heads out of town. He's headed for a talk show where he's going to try to promote his book very unsuccessfully. People just aren't Loomis fans in this movie, and I'm not. They really ruin the Loomis character in this movie. He is just a jerk and an idiot. It's not the Loomis that we want to see. Lori, very upset after finding this out, heads back to the Brackett house, packs a bag, and takes off. She's very mad, yelling at Annie, and she goes to her friends Maya and Harley's house to crash there. When Annie finally talks to Sheriff Brackett, he says that he'll have to explain everything later, and he sends a deputy over to guard Annie. I don't know if he thought something was up at this point or just because it's Halloween again, but it didn't end up working out anyway. Lori decides she wants to go to a Halloween party with Maya and Harley, so they head there and she begins drinking as much as she can to get drunk, probably to get her mind off of everything that's going on. Michael is still in town, making his way around. He encounters a small child outside trick or treating, doesn't do anything. At the party, they're still drinking, having a good time. Harley decides to go off with a man in a Wolfman costume, goes to his van, and goes inside. They're about to fool around, but he goes outside to take a leak, where Michael then kills him. He breaks the back window of the van and strangles Harley. And then in the party, Laurie's having a hard time. She's drank too much. She starts to see things. She sees a vision of Mrs. Myers in the white ghost format and freaks out. Maya eventually comforts her and decides she's going to drive her home. At the Brackett house, Annie is getting ready for her evening. The deputy's outside. He goes to have a smoke break, and Michael walks out from behind a tree and wraps a rope around his neck and snaps his neck. He then goes inside and kills Annie. It's worth noting that every time we see Michael going around, we're also seeing the ghostly format of his mother and the child version of himself, watching everything and also giving him commands. He mutilates Annie and just takes her out, cuts her up, and leaves her in the bathroom, bleeding to death. Lori and Maya arrive. They go upstairs and find Annie, and Lori's very upset trying to comfort her, but Annie does pass away on the bathroom floor from her injuries. Maya's downstairs trying to call for help, and Michael finds her, kills her, pins her to the kitchen table, and stabs her to death. And then he goes upstairs after Lori. Lori runs out of the house and flees as Sheriff Brackett and the other police arrive to find Annie. Lori makes it to the road and she flags down a motorist. He stops and is helping her into the car, saying he's going to take her to a hospital. But Michael shows up, kills him, throws him through the windshield of the car, and then flips the car over. He then takes an unconscious Lori and takes her back to the shack he's in, where she's now being tormented by the ghostly Mrs. Myers and the child Michael Myers, who is restraining Lori. She's seeing them, fully seeing them. She thinks she's being restrained by the child. She's talking to the mother, who's telling her to say, "I love you, mommy," and Michael is just sitting in observing. The police find them and surround the shack. Dr. Loomis sees it on the news and decides to try to get himself a little bit of redemption and goes to help. The sheriff wants him out of there, but Loomis runs up to the shack and goes inside. And inside, he tells Michael that the girl needs to come with him. Lori says she's being held down, and Loomis tries to tell her there's no one holding her. And at this point, the ghostly Mrs. Myers says, "It's time, Michael, take us all home." And Michael then kills Dr. Loomis by stabbing him several times. And then he's going to go after Lori, you would think, but Sheriff Brackett manages to get a line of sight with a rifle and shoots Michael, hitting him. Michael then collapses onto some farm equipment, becoming impaled. Lori goes over, actually says she loves her brother, and Michael's about to stab her, but he's too weak, drops his arm, and then she takes the knife and stabs Michael several times. We assume killing Michael at this point. And then Lori emerges from the shack wearing Michael's mask. She kneels down and takes the mask off, and we end this movie with Lori in a sanitarium in a white room, sitting on a bed, smiling as she now sees the ghostly Mrs. Myers walking towards her with the stupid white horse. This was a very bad Halloween movie. There's not a lot to be said about this installment in the series. I think it's bad from the word go. I don't like this whole white horse thing they brought in, that Michael's seeing visions of his dead mother, seeing himself as a child, following around, telling him what to do as he's been wandering around waiting for Halloween to come back around. I don't like the fact that they added sound effects to him where he's like grunting as he's killing people, stabbing people. It's just unnecessary. Didn't need to happen. In the first movie, the first remake, I should say, they tried to normalize Michael Myers, which I don't like. I don't like the fact that they tried to make him more normal. They tried to give some psychological explanation to his situation. They tried to make him like any other serial killer, and he's not. He's not a normal serial killer who can be explained. That's the whole point of Michael Myers. And this movie just kind of continued that more. They try to go deep into the disturbed mind of Michael Myers and what's leading him and what's guiding him, and it just doesn't work. It's dumb. And in this movie, they actually, I mean, they could have probably found a way around it if they decided to do a part three, but they kill Michael Myers in this movie, and in a pretty normal fashion, nothing extreme. He's shot once, collapses onto some farm equipment, and then gets stabbed several times by his own sister. It's just, I mean, not a good movie in my opinion. Not much to redeem it. An all-time low point in the Halloween franchise. Michael's mask in this movie is the same mask from the first movie. It's just more worn and weathered from him carrying it around for a year as he wanders. And it was already worn out in the first movie. This time it's worse. It gets ripped partially open, so one of Michael's eyes is kind of exposed the whole movie. But we had seen his face several times in this movie as he walks around before he puts the mask on. So the mask didn't really serve much of a purpose other than, again, his psychological need to hide behind the mask. All in all, not a great mask for this movie. I didn't really like the mask for either of these movies, and this one being worn, weathered, and gone just didn't work. Michael's official kill count for this movie is 14. There are other deaths that aren't related to Michael. Like the first death in the movie is the coroner's van driver. He is killed when he crashes into a cow. Michael then kills the other passenger, his first kill, whose name was Gary Scott. He decapitated him with a shard of glass. Next, we get several kills in the hospital, but these don't count because they are kills that were in Laurie's dream. The official kills start again with Floyd, one of the people who were trying to chase Michael off their land. He was stabbed in the stomach and then impaled on the deer antlers on the hood. His friend Sherman Benny was killed, stabbed several times by Michael, and the daughter Jasleen was stabbed several times by Michael as well. Michael also killed their dog, but I don't count animal kills in these movies in the official count. The next person Michael kills is Howard Boggs at the strip club. He kills him outside by stomping him in the face 5 times. He goes inside and kills the club owner, Lou Martini. He smashes his head up against a wall, and he kills the stripper named Misty Dawn by bashing her head against a mirror several times as well. He then goes to the party and kills Wolfie, stabbing him in the back several times. He kills Harley by strangling her. He goes to the Brackett house and kills Deputy Andy Neal by snapping his neck. He kills Annie Brackett by mutilating her, basically stabbing her and cutting her several times, and she bled to death. He stabs Maya Rockwell to death. He kills the motorist who came to help Lori by throwing him through the windshield of the car. And finally, he killed Dr. Loomis by stabbing him several times in the shack. And the final kill of the movie was Michael himself, killed by Laurie Strode. She stabbed him several times after he had been shot by Sheriff Brackett and collapsed onto some farm equipment. This movie, for reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, it received a 23% score from the critics, getting a rotten score. It received a 44% from the audiences, which I find very surprising. And the even more surprising score is over on IMDb. This movie gets a 5.8 out of 10 from users over there. I, as I said, just am not a fan of this movie. I view this as the low point in the franchise, and I score this movie at a 2 out of 10. So that is my review of 2009's Halloween 2. As I have said several times, for me, just not a very good movie in the series, and I was glad that it ended here. I actually was just hoping they would end the franchise here rather than continue this storyline. I really did not want it to continue. Luckily, there are brighter days ahead, as after a long gap from 2009 to 2018, we do get to Return of Halloween with the new H40 storyline, and I am very excited about that timeline shift, and that's where we'll be going next. Please let me know your comments on Halloween 2 from 2009. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm a little too critical of this movie, and if you think this movie has any really redeeming qualities to it. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and keep an eye out for the next video coming soon.